Once again, the Queen of Consorts surprises us, but not in a good way.
You've heard royal announcements before, but nothing prepared the palace for this. Behind closed doors, King Charles made a decision that instantly transformed Camilla's future and shattered the position she believed was secure. The message was brutally simple. Camilla would no longer continue as queen. And when those words finally reached Camilla, the silence inside the room became more terrifying than any public declaration. Because this was not gossip drifting through palace corridors, not another temporary adjustment dressed up as royal strategy, but a calculated removal of authority signed off by Charles himself. Senior aides had already been instructed to prepare language controlling Camilla's constitutional and ceremonial future, covering everything from Camilla's place beside the sovereign at state occasions to the privileges attached to queenship. Charles had not merely changed a schedule. Charles had redrawn the monarchy around Camilla. When Camilla received the wording privately, Camilla read it once, paused, and then read it again before placing the page flat upon the table. For years, Camilla had believed that surviving scandal, judgment, and relentless public hostility had finally secured Camilla's position beside Charles. Now, one sentence destroyed that certainty. Camilla looked directly at Charles and asked whether Charles had made the decision before speaking to Camilla. Charles hesitated. That hesitation said everything. Charles finally told Camilla the decision was permanent. The marriage would remain, but Camilla's royal position would not. Cold, precise, devastating. Then Camilla discovered something even more explosive. Several ceremonial responsibilities expected by Camilla had already been transferred, proving Charles had not acted impulsively. Arrangements were waiting, names had been moved, engagements had been altered. Someone had prepared for the morning after Camilla lost the crown, and William had known before the wider royal household. While Camilla believed Camilla remained protected, William had already entered discussions with Charles about the monarchy's next phase. In that instant, Camilla's shock hardened into suspicion. Because Camilla no longer wanted merely to know what Charles had decided, Camilla wanted to know whether William had helped Charles decide that the crown could survive without Camilla as queen. For Charles, Camilla, and William, this was never simply a dispute about one title. Charles was wrestling with institutional survival, Camilla was watching decades of sacrifice collapse, and William was being forced to consider whether family loyalty could coexist with the future stability of the crown. Britain saw only a bombshell announcement, but inside the palace, love, legitimacy, memory, and succession were colliding behind locked doors. Queenship had never been an ordinary label to Camilla. It was Camilla's proof that every humiliation endured beside Charles had led somewhere, that Camilla had not merely remained in Charles's life, but had finally been recognized beside Charles before the world. Now Charles wanted the marriage while removing the recognition, leaving Camilla to wonder whether the institution had accepted Camilla only temporarily. Camilla reminded Charles of the years when every appearance was examined and every smile treated like evidence. Charles listened because Charles understood the accusation. Camilla believed Charles had allowed Camilla to endure the ugliest years beside Charles, only to push Camilla away after Camilla reached the place they once fought to make possible. Charles reached for Camilla's hand. Camilla pulled away. The movement lasted seconds, but it exposed a wound no polished statement could conceal. Charles admitted the decision had cost Charles personally, yet Charles insisted the monarchy could no longer tolerate uncertainty surrounding William's authority as heir. William carried that responsibility uneasily. Before speaking with Charles again, William carefully considered every word about Camilla, fearing that a demand for boundaries might sound like cruelty toward the woman who had shared Charles's life for decades. Yet William believed ignoring the uncertainty would make the eventual confrontation more dangerous. Camilla's suspicions intensified when a revised calendar arrived showing other names occupying engagements Camilla believed still belonged to Camilla. One altered ceremony immediately dragged Camilla back to Windsor, where months earlier William had challenged Camilla's authority during what should have been a routine planning meeting. Camilla had increasingly carried responsibilities while Charles delegated work during periods of strain, and Camilla had begun believing certain decisions should possess Camilla's independent weight. William objected not to Camilla's presence, but to the blurred line between spouse, sovereign, and future king. The argument erupted over seating and precedence at an upcoming ceremony. Camilla demanded control. William pushed back because the arrangement affected William's household and the future shape of royal representation. Charles attempted to calm Camilla and William, but neither surrendered. Then Camilla stared at William and declared that William could not begin acting like monarch while Charles remained on the throne. William fell silent. Charles stiffened. The distance disagreement had suddenly become an accusation about succession itself. After William left Windsor, Charles asked Camilla whether Camilla viewed queenship as authority separate from Charles. Camilla answered that queenship had to mean something independently. Charles never forgot that answer. Quietly, Charles commissioned a confidential memorandum defining the powers of the sovereign, the heir, and the consort. What began at Windsor as clarification became the foundation of Camilla's downfall, and while Camilla remained unaware, Charles carried that document toward one final private confrontation. Months later, Charles carried the memorandum into a private meeting with Camilla, where there were no aides, no cameras, and no ceremonial smiles to soften the blow. Charles looked at Camilla and delivered 6 brutal words: "I have made my decision." Camilla immediately asked whether William had demanded her removal, but Charles refused to let William carry the blame, insisting the final responsibility belonged to Charles alone. That answer shattered the convenient villain Camilla had created. Camilla reminded Charles that Charles had once asked Camilla to survive humiliation and public fury, because one day Camilla and Charles would stand together without apology. Charles lowered his eyes and admitted that becoming king had changed what Charles believed could be promised. The marriage would survive, but Camilla's independent royal authority would not. Then, Charles placed the signed document between them. Camilla did not touch it. Camilla understood that the signature had already transformed a private wound into an irreversible royal reality. But losing queenship was only the beginning. Schedules changed, committees moved, and responsibilities disappeared before Camilla could protest. William received greater influence over long-term planning, while Princess Anne inherited several duties Camilla had expected to retain. William approved the revised arrangements without celebration, understanding that every deleted line represented another piece of Camilla's hard-won public identity. Anne privately warned Charles that removing authority was one matter, but publicly humiliating Camilla could tear the family apart. Charles listened, yet the machinery continued moving. Camilla was excluded from senior planning meetings and discovered Anne's new assignments through a calendar rather than a conversation. Then came the first crushing test. Camilla arrived for a familiar royal reception and found Camilla's chair removed. Camilla's briefing papers reassigned, and practical questions redirected toward William's team. When Camilla quietly asked whether Camilla was expected to remain, nobody answered immediately. That hesitation was devastating. Charles watched in silence, and Camilla realized the palace had already learned to operate without Camilla's authority. Anne later assured Camilla that Anne had never requested those responsibilities and would not treat the transfer as a victory. Then Camilla learned that William had personally opposed any public ceremony surrounding Camilla's loss of rank. The revelation did not fit Camilla's theory of revenge, so Camilla requested a private meeting with William. Camilla asked directly whether William wanted Camilla removed as queen. William answered that William wanted boundaries, not punishment. William feared inheriting unresolved arguments over authority after Charles was no longer able to settle them. Camilla finally admitted that every challenge to Camilla's power had felt like another rejection of Camilla personally. William carefully explained that questioning Camilla's authority was not the same as rejecting Camilla from the family. William could not restore what Charles had taken, but William promised Camilla would not be treated as an outsider. Then the announcement exploded across Britain. Broadcasters interrupted programming, newspapers invoked constitutional crisis, and crowds gathered outside Buckingham Palace. Some praised Charles for protecting the succession, others condemned Charles for discarding Camilla after years of service. One front page showed Charles and Camilla walking in opposite directions beneath the merciless words, "The crown without Camilla." Yet the debate slowly changed. This was not simply about Camilla losing a title, it was about Charles separating personal devotion from institutional power. Before their first appearance together, Camilla told Charles that losing queenship hurt, but discovering Charles had prepared everything before trusting Camilla with the truth hurt more. Charles accepted the accusation without defending himself. William joined them briefly, and Camilla thanked William for speaking honestly. There was no dramatic reconciliation, only fragile respect replacing suspicion. Finally, Charles and Camilla stepped forward together. Camilla no longer possessed the ceremonial authority Camilla had fought decades to achieve, while William carried greater responsibility and Anne continued the transferred duties. Charles had protected the boundary of the crown but damaged the deepest trust in Charles's marriage. Camilla had lost queenship, yet Camilla refused to appear defeated. The palace had clarified power, but the silence surrounding Charles, Camilla, and William revealed the unsettling cost and suggested this royal reckoning might not be finished after all.